On January 17th, I boarded a ferry with my dad from La Paz in Baja California to Mazatlan, Sinaloa, and the start of the Trans-Mexico bikepacking route. I started noticing what seemed like thorn pricks, and then I turned on the light. The last couple days, I've been hearing a sort of a creaking sound. It seems my frame just straight up cracked in half.
Welcome to cranking. Yeah, we cranking.
The northern part of the Trans-Mexico route follows back roads 2.5 megameters from Mazatlan in the north to Oaxaca in the south. Upon arriving in Mazatlan, we were lucky enough to score free accommodation thanks to a friend who works at Partner Host, a vacation home rental manager. The next day, we took a much shorter ferry over to Isla de la Piedra, which is not an island, but a peninsula. And from there, we headed inland, up into the mountains. The first few days of the Trans-Mexico route are as beautiful as they are grueling. For 3 full days, we climbed constantly as the road took us from the coast up into the central Mexican plateau.
Feel stupendous.
The road we were on is called the Espinoso del Diablo, or the Devil's Backbone. And it was once the main connection between Durango and the coast. Recently, however, a new, more modern highway was constructed, which meant we had the Espinoso del Diablo all to ourselves. Once we entered Durango State, we were treated to some amazing views of the craggy mountains and deep valleys of the Sierra Madre Occidental. This stretch of road is considered one of Mexico's most dangerous highways. I wasn't worried though. I'm pretty sure it's just dangerous for cars. As we climbed higher, the temperature dropped dramatically, from the hot tropical coast to chilly, windy pine forests. Near the top, the route leaves the old highway and crosses a national park before connecting to an old railroad. It wasn't all easy riding from there, however. Many giant puddles blocked our progress, sometimes requiring creative ways to get around them. Looks like one could also get up onto the ledge there. Eventually, the route took us back to pavement and down into the city of Durango, where we relaxed for a couple of days. Then, my dad got on a plane home, and I continued on my own once again. For about a week, I rode lonely roads through remote mountains, hardly seeing anyone. I passed through farmland and numerous small towns and villages. Before long, however, I arrived in Zacatecas, an old colonial city founded on silver mining. While there, I stayed with a Warm Showers host and met up with some other cyclists. The room I got to stay in turned out to be an old radio studio. After a couple days of exploring the city, I headed back out to the road. The other cyclists had left the day before, so I didn't end up riding with them. The roads that the Trans-Mexico route follows are not always easy, but it's nice getting away from the traffic of larger roads and riding through places I would never have thought to visit otherwise. It seemed like every town I rode through had a beautiful plaza with an impressive church overlooking it. At one point, the road was completely washed out. Fortunately, I spotted a footpath that would get me to the other side. Alright, so it seems we've lost a front brake cable. Fortunately, I have a spare. So, let's see if I can repair it here. I think I'll try to get to the bottom there and then maybe find a nice spot in the shade to work on it. Alright, brakes fixed. Now it's just time to push back up that hill. I probably should have just taken the bags off and brought them up separately, but that only occurred to me about halfway up, and by then I was already committed. And there we go. Easy as that. That's where we were like an hour ago. After talking to some people in the next town, I learned that they had intentionally not fixed the road because they were tired of people from the neighboring town coming over and causing trouble. I was back on pavement, but it wasn't long before I noticed another problem with the bike. So I started hearing this sound coming from the bike. I figured it was from the rear wheel eventually. So I was just inspecting it. I couldn't figure out what it was until I started looking a little closer at the tire. And it appears this tire is pretty much worn out. Good thing I have a spare tire with me. Alright, got the new tire on. This is the spare tire that German family gave me back in episode 3. I decided to take a short detour to a nearby city, Aguascalientes, to get a new set of tires before heading on. While there, I got a bed at a hostel and decided to explore the city for a bit. It turned out to have a beautiful square with an amazing cathedral. This part of the Trans-Mexico route was defined by the sharp contrast between the large modern cities and the rural backcountry farmland. Eventually, I saw something in the distance on top of a mountain. As I got closer, it turned out to be a giant statue of Jesus. The route headed straight up the mountain, steeply enough that I had to push most of the way. At the top, I discovered the statue was part of a massive monument that attracts thousands of pilgrims every year. I was allowed to camp at the base of the statue, and the next morning, I headed down the other side of the mountain to Guanajuato. Another mining city, Guanajuato is also perched up in the mountains. Just like in Zacatecas, the wealth from mining led to some awesome architecture and vibrant culture. I spent a few days there as well. A couple days later, I arrived in San Miguel de Allende, another beautiful city, famous for its art scene. Everywhere around the city were amazing murals. Again, I couldn't just ride through without stopping to appreciate. I took a few more days off to relax and get to know the city. I was starting to feel like I was falling behind schedule, but I didn't worry too much. I decided that San Miguel de Allende would be the last major city I would be stopping at before Oaxaca. My next challenge would be climbing the Nevado de Toluca, a giant volcano and by far the highest point on the Trans-Mexico route. Once again, as I slowly climbed, I was treated to a range of biomes, from the hot, arid lowlands to cool, shady forests. And finally, chilly, high alpine tundra. That night, it got well below freezing. And the next morning, I had to wait a while for my tent to melt and then dry before I could head on. I took a short detour into the caldera of the volcano, where I took a moment to enjoy being surrounded by snowy peaks. Then I headed back down the other side of the mountain, along a narrow bit of single track, quickly traveling from the highest, coolest point on the route to one of the lowest and hottest.
Well, it's starting to get really hot. You know, I knew this would come, but I'm now south of Mexico City. I'm below 1,000 meters, 300 feet, 3,000 feet, which is the lowest that I've been since leaving Sinaloa. And spring has sprung. It is March now, and so the days are just getting longer and hotter. And it's making it tough. You know, every time I have to climb a hill, I gotta climb it in stages, you know, with a lot of breaks. And so I'm definitely going slower, but that's all right. As long as I'm making progress every day, you know, I'll get there eventually. Until then, just gotta keep cranking in the heat. So anyway, I stopped for the night, walked up an old side road and went off the side of the side road, and found this nice little flat spot, the one little spot without any vegetation. Cooked my meal, set up the tent. I'm in the tent now, and I started noticing like a few sort of what seemed like thorn pricks. And then I turn on the light, and it turns out that the tent was full of ants. And that's when I realized that what I did was I camped on top of an ant hill. I mean, it wasn't a hill, it was just a flat bare spot, but as soon as the sun went down, as soon as the light went out, I think that's when the ants started emerging. And we'll see if you can hear them. Yeah, that's the sound of a million ants, inches below where I'm sitting. Biting ants, of course. Hopefully they're not able to bite a hole and get into the tent, because then, well, I might just be a skeleton in the morning, which is a terrible thought. I could try to move my tent, but that would mean going out there. So the other option, of course, is just to try to get some sleep, which is, I think, where I'm at right now, after I double check that there's no more ants inside of the tent. not really what I had in mind for a relaxing night after a tough day. So the last couple days, I've been hearing a sort of a creaking sound coming from the fork area. It seems my frame just straight up cracked in half. So I have to figure out how to deal with that now. Okay, so the plan is to basically walk the 9 kilometers to the next town, and maybe there'll be a welder there. If so, see if they can weld it together again. So this certainly puts a damper on my my itinerary. I was hoping to do, for the next 2 weeks, to be a big push, you know, to ride all the way to Oaxaca, but I guess not. Time to do some walking, some problem solving.
As I walked my bike, I began to smell the unmistakable smell of death. For some reason, there are quite a few dead cows up here, in various states of decay, as well as dozens of vultures attending them. It seemed like a bad omen, but fortunately, I don't believe in omens, and it wasn't long before I ran into a man with a truck collecting firewood. He agreed to give me a ride into town, and even brought me to the house of the local welder.
Alright, well, that went better than expected. Pretty sure we're back in business. It's about 4 hours later, but probably won't get to the town I had in mind, but we're still cranking. So I got really lucky that there was a guy to help me weld together the bike again. But I figure it's probably a temporary solution, because it was just a basic construction weld, I guess, just an arc weld, and for a structural piece of the bike like this, probably needs something a bit more specialized. So that's why I'm headed to Mexico City. Apparently there's a studio there, a frame building shop, that has the capabilities of basically replacing the entire down tube.
I headed to the closest town, where I caught a bus to Mexico City. I dropped my frame off at the shop and decided to spend a few days enjoying the city. After it was done, I took the bus back to where I had left the route and continued on, eager to make up for lost time. While there had been many mountains before, the route through the mountains of eastern Guerrero and western Oaxaca state were particularly steep, and the villages I rode through were especially remote. I always love seeing the amazing murals so common in Mexican towns. In one village, I asked if there was anywhere I could spend the night, and I was invited to sleep in the government building, next to an altar with a candle that burned all night.
Well, I'm pushing again. Yeah, it's another tough day. For this section, I was estimating I would do around 60 kilometers a day. Yesterday, I did around 20. The day before was like 35. So not quite up to my expectations, but I did gain a lot of elevation in that time as well, so that's got to count for something. Today, it's more climbing. I'm on a section of hike-a-bike here that's pretty washed out. It's slow progress, but it's progress. As long as I keep going forward, I'll get somewhere.
By crossing this pass, I entered Oaxaca State.
Well, I just left the Trans-Mexico route today. I got as far as San Juan Mixtepec. But in town, there was a few people I talked to that all pretty much agreed that the road ahead was dangerous. There's a land conflict going on, and I was definitely gonna get shot if I went that way. I'm back on pavement, heading up to the highway. Yesterday was the spring equinox, so the days are now longer than the nights, which is a little daunting, to be honest. It's already pretty hot every day, and I guess that just means it's gonna get hotter. It also means that I'm now 9 months into this trip, which is a big milestone because the original estimation for the length of this trip was about 1.5 years, 18 months, so that means I'm about halfway through. I also estimated about 30 megameters for the total distance of this trip, and I just passed 15, so I guess I'm right on schedule. Doesn't really feel like the halfway point though, if I'm honest. I'm still in Mexico. There's a lot of Mexico left after Oaxaca. It's at least another megameter or so to get to Guatemala. Well, it feels like I'm so far from South America, far from the equator. I've ridden through some hot terrain, but a lot more hot terrain is still to come. I've ridden over some mountains, but the highest mountains are still to come.
I finally arrived in Oaxaca, just in time for Easter. and so I got to see the Procession of the Saints, a tradition in which people from the surrounding towns carry their patron saint for miles into town just in time for Easter Mass. I spent about a week and a half in town, resting and working on this video. Next, I'll be heading east for a while, as I follow the Trans-Mexico Sur route, through the rest of Oaxaca State, into Chiapas, and finally Guatemala. Well, that was a long one. Thank you so much for waiting. If you're watching this later, there was about a couple months between this video and the last one. You know, I didn't think it would take this long to get to Oaxaca, but I mean, as you can see, the mechanicals, the heat, and all the beautiful cities I had to stop in really made this section take a little longer than I expected. But thanks for sticking with it. If you want to help support the channel, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. That really does help grow the channel. And you could also join the Patreon community. I've got a Patreon set up. Its link is in the description. You can join for $5 a month and get early access to videos, as well as an interactive map showing the progress of the route so far. Thank you so much to all my supporters on Patreon, and especially a big thanks to my Crank Tier supporters: Judy Friesem, Dan Phillips, Gran Bear Mickle, Kate and Mike Glasser, Jane Hilton, JK, and Michael Barker. The next video, I think, will be a bit shorter, a bit sooner. I'm hoping to upload these around once a month. Until then, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.